Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us Across the Fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. This year marks the 160th anniversary of the Morrill Act of 1862. Signed into law by Abraham Lincoln, this law essentially establishes public colleges and universities in the United States. The act is named after Justin Smith Morrill, a native of Strafford, Vermont. Although he couldn't afford to go to college himself, Morrill was an insatiably curious man who was involved in many intellectual pursuits, from botany to business to agriculture and architecture, not to mention politics and public policy. In a moment, we'll learn how you can literally walk in Morrill's footsteps with a visit to the Morrill Homestead. And to help us learn more about this Vermonter whose legacy is still felt today, I want to welcome Tracy McFadden. She's the director of Friends of the Morrill Homestead, and John Freitag, who works for the Division of Historic Preservation as a steward for this site. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
So John, just to start, who was Justin Smith Morrill beyond his landmark legislation that bears his name?
Well, as you mentioned, he wasn't able to go to college. He was the son of our blacksmith here in town. He was born in 1810. Three things about Morrill that are particularly important is, first, he was a self-made man. He didn't have much to start with, but he managed through storekeeping to amass some money, and always worked hard. Secondly, he was a book-made man. He loved books. He kept reading, kept educating himself, and used the books to help create the life he wanted. And third, the most important thing about Morrill was that he gave back to others. He wasn't just in it for himself, but he was involved in politics and working to make our nation better for everybody.
Wow. Well, clearly he was a Renaissance man of the 19th century. And it was interesting, in our research, it seems that he is one of the shapers of the United States' first income tax laws.
Well, he was. This was part of an effort. He was the chairman of Ways and Means during the Civil War, and he did much to finance the Union cause. And one of the ways that he did that was, with others, to institute an income tax. It was, you had to make a certain amount of money to pay for it, and then it also became graduated. The higher incomes paid more, and the tax was later ended after the Civil War debts were paid.
Wow. And so John, the Justin Smith Morrill Homestead is a state-owned historic site and Vermont's first national historic landmark. What do these distinctions mean, and why are they significant?
Well, the importance about the national thing is this is a special designation for sites that have an important heritage relevance to our nation. And this site, because of both Morrill's Land Grant College Act, as well as its architecture and all that he did, has particular significance and has been recognized as such.
Great. And Tracy, what's the role of your organization, the Friends of the Morrill Homestead, in regards to this site?
Well, we work closely with the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation to foster a greater awareness of the life and legacy of Justin Morrill, and also to preserve and maintain this site. We encourage people to come to the Morrill Homestead by hosting a number of programs and community events. And our program talks focus on history, but we also follow the interests and pursuits of Morrill himself, offering classes and children camps and workshops on art and horticulture and traditional crafts such as basket making and fiber dyeing. We also host large community events like our Gallery in the Garden art exhibit and auction, and an open house, and our apple and cheese festival. And we also maintain the Victorian gardens and historic orchard as well.
Well, yeah, one of the most memorable aspects of the homestead are the gardens and the grounds. So talk about the significance of those gardens and how you work with the UVM Master Gardeners to care for them.
Well, we hire master gardeners from the UVM Extension program to manage the Victorian gardens. We also hire local teenage assistants to help with the work, but we really rely on volunteers, including those going through the Master Gardener Extension program. Morrill left behind very detailed notes. He was a serious student of landscape gardening, and his notes, we find his designs for the plan and plantings for the walkways and gardens surrounding the house. And we've used those to restore and maintain the garden. Also, in the orchard, there are 7 original trees from Morrill's time, and we have taken scions from those and grafted them to new rootstock to plant genetically identical trees to Morrill's, and have also researched other apple varieties that would have been around during his time. I think it's important to note that even though the house is open on a schedule, the gardens and grounds here at the homestead are always open for anybody to enjoy.
Well, it's so interesting that you have these heritage fruit trees and flowers, and some of these plants are very rare for Vermont and New England. What can we learn from the agricultural practices Morrill used that are still viable today?
Well, he did a lot of experimenting with plantings from around the world to see which would be best suited to the Vermont climate. They didn't have planting zones back then, so it was really hit or miss. Many of the original plantings survive today. We have the oldest Norway spruce in Vermont, and also a Cobus magnolia that came from Asia. This was really a time when a lot of exchange was going on around the world with different plants. One thing we've learned that they didn't realize in that time is that you need to be really careful introducing non-native species. For instance, Morrill brought in buckthorn for hedges and stuff, and we know better now.
Yeah. And so John, we don't want to forget about the house itself. And before we go inside, why is it pink?
Well, if you had the money in those days, you were supposed to build your house out of stone. Morrill didn't have that kind of money, so he used the flush boards and the pink paint to replicate Italian sandstone. But you sort of would have had to been into the know to know that that's what he was doing. In any case, it's turned out to be really beautiful. I tell the kids these days, instead of reading Sir Walter Scott, if Morrill was alive today, he'd be reading Harry Potter, and the house would look more like Hogwarts.
It almost is, it's just beautiful. It's a kind of very picture perfect. And one of the most famous pictures of Morrill is him sitting in his library, a beautiful, beautiful room. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we kind of informally refer to it in Strafford as Strafford's first man cave. Morrill did love books, and this was his sanctum sanctorum, where he came to study and read. Morrill was a man with deep roots in Vermont, but he also created branches. He was able to use the books to become one of the most knowledgeable men in the country. And from both his roots in Vermont, his experiences in this village, he used those books in the time to study to shape our nation.
Well, and it looks like it's been preserved beautifully. It's such a beautiful room. And currently, yeah, there it is. Currently, there's an archaeological dig taking place at the Morrill Homestead. What are you finding? What are you learning? Why is that going on?
Well, it's going on because we have to replace the drainage around the entire house, and we will also above the gardens put in a below ground water diversion because we have humidity and moisture problems in the house. But before doing that, because it's such an important site, we need to do our due diligence to understand what we have below ground, not just to look for artifacts, but to see how the landscaping was done when the house was built and to make sure we're not disturbing anything important. And we found some interesting artifacts, tools from when the house was built, square nails, pieces of pottery, and some buttons they're really old, even predate the house itself.
Great. And you've learned a little bit about the pond that's located above the house and its functions on the property. What's the significance of that?
Well, in Vermont, gravity, you move a lot of water, either in the summer and the winter, and gravity is the best way to move water. And so Morrill built the pond up above to feed a whole water system to fountains, to the different buildings, as well as to provide ice for the house and the farm. And we actually did an ice harvest a number of years ago. And on the Morrill, Friends of the Morrill website, there's a link to that ice harvest that was filmed.
Awesome. So, and Tracy, finally, what sort of educational programming? About 30 seconds left.
We have a different focus each year. This year, particularly, it has been the landscaping because we partnered with Olmsted 200 celebrating his 200th birthday. And we have a symposium coming up September 10th, looking at the federal lands that were used in the Land Grant Act and who they originally belonged to, the indigenous people. And our biggest event of the year coming up on September 25th this year is our Apple and Cheese Harvest Festival, also known as Apple Fest. And that's for everybody, the whole family to come.
Great. Tracy and John, thank you so much for joining us today to tell us about Justin Morrill and the homestead. The Justin Morrill Homestead is just a short drive off of Interstates 89 and 91. It's open from late May until early October. You can visit the website on the screen for details or call 802-828-3051 for more details. And once again, thank you so much for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.